writing about Marshall University. You guys had an opportunity to get back from the game. I appreciate everybody's coverage. First, want to start off by congratulating our very own Mark Martin and Steve Cotton on their much due induction into the West Virginia Broadcasting Sports Hall of Fame. Obviously, these guys have put a lot into not only sports here in West Virginia, but into Marshall University. So I want to congratulate those guys. I appreciate everything they do. They've been phenomenal since I've been here. Two of the hardest working men in the business, in my opinion, from the time that I've been here. So congratulations to them. And just like always, anytime a member of the Marshall family gets recognized, I think that speaks for all of us. So phenomenal job by those guys. I hope they continue to achieve in their fields as well. So from the game Friday, seems like it was 2 months ago that we played. But from the game Friday, obviously did some really good things. I thought for the first time in a long time, we played together as a team in all three phases. We talked about how discipline had plagued us before. And when I say discipline, I'm not just talking about hitting someone after the whistle or doing something, quote unquote, bad. It's everything. It's not jumping off sides. It's playing gap control defense. It's, protecting the ball. It's making really good choices and decisions at the quarterback position. It's DBs attacking the ball in the air, not committing penalties. So we talked about that all week. Not that was just for that game, but what has plagued us over our unsuccessful games. You go back and you look at those games, and it was discipline, whether it was lack of gap control, whether it was lack of finish in the fourth quarter, whether it was poor red zone offense, whether it was turnovers, whatever it may be, it was discipline. And I thought for the first time it hit home and we were able to control or manage our discipline. We weren't perfect by any means, still a lot of stuff to clean up. But from a penalty perspective, I think we had 5 penalties and they had 17. So that's a huge difference. Created a lot of positive opportunities for us in the game, allowed us to control the field position battle. For about the third week in a row, I think we all are starting to see our defense play at a very consistent level right now. Are we perfect? No, not at all. There's still a couple opportunities in there where our gap control is not consistent and some of those long runs spit out. But if you look at the game as a whole, I think, especially when we had our first teamers in there, I think we were starting to play really consistent, starting to play really sound, starting to make teams actually have to drive the ball on us down the field. Still got a lot to clean up when we put some of our second stringers and younger guys in there in the second half. It got a little more sloppy than we needed it to be. But I think it's a great learning experience for those guys to understand. It's one thing to say, hey, I want to play. Why aren't I playing? It's another thing to get in the game and actually have to execute. I told those guys yesterday in the meeting, we're going to need those guys as we go down the stretch. So they got to improve. The older guys, we still got to improve. There's still 1 or 2 times where, especially in the run game, the ball is spitting out of there, not because of great blocking, but because of lack of gap control defense. I think we're playing the ball in the air a little bit better at DB. We talked about the penalties that hurt us in certain games. Our guys are starting to play the ball in the air a little bit. I think also part of that is confidence in the defense, confidence that we're stopping the run, confidence that we get a little bit more of a gauge of when they have to throw, what routes they're going to have to throw. As a whole, offensively, we kind of got back to our confident ways. Coach Huff kind of took his please don't fumble, please don't throw an interception glasses off and kind of just allowed our offense to flow and trusted our players. Put a lot on them to make the corrections from the issues that we had in the past. I think it starts with our running game. I know everybody is excited about our tempo and we throw the ball. Yes, that's what we do. But you got to be able to run the ball effectively in order to be able to get those shots down the field and in the intermediate range. I think Grant in the first half played really sound. Someone told me he broke a consistent completion record, which to me, he should always do that. It should just be easily just like routes on air, throw it to the open guy. I've never played quarterback, but it seems easy that way. But no, I think we got a chance to see when he's comfortable and we play ahead of the sticks. It's a lot easier for him to distribute the ball to the people they're supposed to go to. I think you'll see when you look across our stats, we're not just targeting one guy. I think we're letting the offense dictate where the ball goes. When the ball gets in those guys' hands, we're putting it onus on them to make plays. I don't think you have to throw the ball 80 yards down the field to get an 80-yard completion, but I do think you got to have good catch and yards after catch in order to do those things. So really happy with the way the guys played. Got a lot of stuff to clean up in the fourth quarter. We talk about finishing. I didn't think we finished, the way that we want to. Not a lack of effort, but obviously putting some new guys in, some guys getting some opportunities. So in order for us to keep making strides forward, we're going to have to learn how to start fast like we did and finish, because teams are not going to, fold the tent. They're going to continue to play. So we have to play for 60 minutes. So really pleased with the outcome, but definitely still have a lot of work to do. A lot of things we got to get cleaned up as we continue to move forward with this season.
But you mentioned the run game kind of being the catalyst for making you guys go. Just curious, what impact or effect has having Doug Chapman around, particularly with young guys like Rasheem, had on really getting that thing going there?
Yeah, I think anytime you have former players who have been in the locker room and have played at a high level and have had an opportunity to go on and play beyond Marshall, take Mike Bartram in that same sense. When they come back, they're able to tell a different story. As much as I love this university, I love this team, I love this town, I love the reporters, I love the fans. I can't tell the story of a guy that sat in the locker room. That's just one thing I'm not going to be able to do. But I think when you have those guys that have been in the locker room and have went on to have success in their career, when they're able to pour back into our players, that's why I'm thriving so hard to try and get our alumni and our former players back, involved in the NFL and at other universities and other players I've coached. But it's different when you're talking about a player who has sat in the locker room. And I think that's what Doug and Mike also bring back. They've sat in that locker room. They've worn the green. They've worn the helmet. They have a pride that is unmatched, and they've gone on to play at a very high level, so they can pour back into those guys. And I think Rasheem and the rest of the running backs, all the guys on offense, respect them. They have a herd brother love for them, because they know, hey, this is not a guy that's just here, coaching us. This is a guy that's been through what I'm going through, and wants to see this place as successful as we.
Hey, Coach, as you go into this bye week, open week, I should say, is it the way you guys played Saturday? Is it one of those games where, man, I'd like to keep it going because you're trying to get that consistency on a week in, week out basis, or because of guys being beat up, you're in the middle of the season, it's okay this week to kind of have a Saturday off?
Well, I think, from our process, we kind of planned it, the way this kind of planned out. We felt like, getting to this bye week would give us an opportunity, like you said, to rest up. And it's not so much guys beat up or guys out. It's just the ebbs and flows of the season. You go bang your body against, anybody for, 60 minutes for how many ever weeks we've done it. You need that rest. I think you also need that mental rest. If you guys think back a year from today, these guys didn't get to go home during their bye week. So mentally, the mental exhaustion of being in a routine, being in practice, being in the season, not being able to go home, see your family, not be able to go home and take a deep breath, not be able to sit in your dorm and just take a deep breath on the weekend and actually be a normal college student or a normal teenager. I think all of those things are important. I think what we have to do, and I talked to him about it yesterday, is we really got to step back and say, okay, what do we want out of this season? How do we want this season to go? If we have the right mindset, we'll come back, refreshed with a refocused mentality, because we're in control of whatever happens in this FIU game, so we got to make sure our mindset is right. But I do think the break or the open date is needed. And I think for, a lot of people don't think about it, but for a college athlete, it's a lot. So you need that mental, take a deep breath, go home, hug your mom, hug your grandma, come back and be ready to kind of, take the next step.
Hey, Coach, I'm just kind of curious, with the performance on Friday, and you've talked about closing the gap. I know that's probably more of a moving target, not a set in stone ruler like metric here. We're not measuring in feet here, but do you think that we started to see some of that gap being closed, whatever your target is, what the gap is?
Yeah, I and let me go back to my first press conference when you guys listened to me. I don't talk about championships. That's not what I'm talking about. Because I think when you set the mark as just a championship, there's going to be ebbs and flows of the season where you may or you may not, reach that mark. When I talk about closing the gap, I'm talking about playing with the right discipline, playing with the right consistency, executing consistently, playing at a high level. And I think we're starting to do that. I think, for the most visual part of it is probably our defense. Our defense is starting. Does that mean perfect? No. Closing the gap is closing the gap on perfection. So are we ever going to reach it? Like you said, it's a moving target. Probably not. But what we're doing is we're closing the gap. So every time we go out, whether it's practice or a game, we are performing more and more consistent. Well, how do you do those things? You have to focus on the things you need to do to close the gap. So what is that? Focusing on discipline, focusing on execution, focusing on making sure that I'm focused on the bye week and not 3 games down the road. And I think we're starting to do that. And if you can do that over and over and over and over, week in and week out, the byproduct is you will be a champion. You may not win a championship because that's something, there's a lot of ingredients to go to winning a championship. But if we can get to the consistency level that when Marshall University football team takes the field, that we play at this standard, that's what we're trying to get to. Are there going to be times where the other team makes plays? Yeah. Are there going to be times where we stumble? Yeah. But the overall consistency, I think if you look at the last 2 games, we've been a lot more consistent than we were in the previous 3. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get more of the last 2 games. Does that mean we're going to win every game? No. But if we play the way we've played, especially last week, we're going to put ourselves in better position. And that's closing the gap. How can we go out week in and week out and start to play with a little more consistency where it's not, well, is it going to be, 15 turnovers today, or are they going to stone them like they did a week ago? Or is it going to be, hey, they run the ball great today, and all of a sudden, well, who's this team? So that's what we're saying we're closing the gap to where when we hit the field, for the most part, you can pretty much say they're going to play at this level. Now, there's going to be other days when, we do a really, really good job. There's going to be some days where we have some setbacks, but the consistency is what I'm talking about with closing the gap.
Coach, if you look at the last 3 or 4 years with Marshall's program, November has been where the stumbles have happened. Obviously, you get the bye week at a very good time. October 30th, you've got FIU, and then that sort of lumps into that last pivotal 5-game stretch. How do you go about trying to change that mentality when you do have a lot of veteran guys that have experienced that in November? Is it a deal where you go back to the, fourth quarter program mentality this week during the bye week, or how do you approach that?
Well, I think one, and everybody probably hates me because we stumbled early. So I'm hoping that, and I asked the guys yesterday in the meeting, does something bad have to happen again for us to start playing the way we know we should play? Or can we learn from the feeling that we had in those 3 games when we went into the locker room and we didn't have the result we wanted? So what I hope is, I hope we can learn from the results that we didn't like moving forward, rather than something bad having to happen before all of a sudden, okay, hey, I get my mind right. Does your boss have to say, if you're late to work again, I'm going to fire you before you start showing up on time? Or do you say, hey, you know what? I'm supposed to be on time. I'm going to be on time. And I think if we can learn from the way we felt in those last or the 3 games that we didn't get the results we wanted, and if we can remember the feeling we had in the locker room versus ODU, in the locker room versus North Texas, hopefully that will propel us to do the things we need to do throughout the week to get the results we want.
Coach James McGee gets the start on offensive line last week. We got to talk to him a little bit earlier. Just curious what you thought about him and where that offensive line is at now. I know you've liked where they've been at throughout the season. You got a little bit of injury issue there with Logan, but how are you with the offensive line right now?
Yeah, I think they've done a really good job of just continuing to work. You know, we came into camp. Obviously, some guys had more experience than others. And we told the whole team, I don't know when your opportunity is going to come, but it's your job to prepare. And I think James McGee is a great example of a guy that has just prepared his tail off. He's gotten better each week. And his opportunity came, and I thought he did a good job. Obviously, there's some things, that he would like to clean up and we would like to see better. But I thought when his opportunity came, he stepped up and, relied on his preparation. But it goes back to, his preparation all through spring, all through summer, all through camp, not knowing when his opportunity would come. And I think it's a good example of, when you put your head down and you work to close the gap or you trust the process, when your opportunity comes, you're prepared. We got to get more guys like him, not just in the O-line, but on the entire team to have that mentality, because you don't know when a guy's going to go down. You don't know when your number is going to be called. If your number's called and it's 49-14 or whatever, yeah, you may be able to get away with some of those mistakes. But if your number's called kind of like James's was 0-0, he didn't know going into the game how it was going to play out. But he was able to rely on his preparation. He had his confidence in him. I think Coach Morrissey's done a phenomenal job of moving the pieces around on that O-line so that we have the next best guy. It may not be the guy that's listed as the backup guard or the backup tackle. It's the next best guy. And I think those guys have done a phenomenal job of kind of banding together. And, Millette will tell those guys, man, I don't want you in here if you don't know what you're doing. And those younger guys, take pride in knowing what to do. So when they get in there, that they can, carry their weight.
Obviously, a lot of noise over the last 24 hours, really, and it's going to continue during the off week or open week regarding CUSA's future, especially, having some young kids and trying to manage that as a first-year coach. What's the mentality for you all trying to address sort of an uncertain situation for Conference USA?
Yeah, well, first, I've had numerous conversations way before it hit the Twitter bug, about this conference realignment with our administration and our leadership. And first, let me say our leadership has a plan that I am 100% behind. They are doing it the best way for Marshall University athletics and Marshall University as a whole. I think what we got to make sure we understand is you got to take your fan hat off for one point and say, okay, what is the best for Marshall athletics? And I'm not saying that's to leave or stay. I think our administration has a plan that will be rolled out here, when they feel is necessary after gathering all the information. But it's not a football decision. It's not just, hey, what would be best for football. When you talk about changing conferences, you're talking about budgets, you're talking about TV contracts, you're talking about, okay, where are we at right now from a foundation standpoint comparative to moving to another league or staying in this league? You're talking about, okay, how is this going to affect the women's cross-country team? How is this going to affect volleyball? How is this going to affect softball? How is this going to affect baseball? It's not a football move. We're not just moving the football team. It's everybody. And yeah, it's great to say, hey, we would love to play such and such and such and such conference or in this conference or whatever. But you got to look at a lot of other things. How is the cross-country team going to compete budget-wise if we make a move or we stay put and we don't have the financial backing to do that? It's not just a football thing. And I am in full support of our administration because they're looking at it from 30,000 feet, although I am ultimately concerned with what this football program needs to do to play well on Saturdays. But it's bigger than that. It's bigger than just what's going to put more fans in the football seats. It's way bigger than that. And there's a lot of other things you got to look at. I had a conversation with Jeff O'Malley earlier today, last couple of weeks, and he and his cabinet constituents are viewing all of those things. because it's not just, hey, everybody else is moving, so we have to move, or everybody else is staying, so we have to stay. I get it from the fans' perspective, but you gotta have way more information to make these decisions than what you read on Twitter. So I fully support and back our administration. They have been very transparent with myself and all the other coaches with what we want and what's the best for Marshall. They have taken feedback, they've done research, and I feel confident that they're going to make the best decision for Marshall University moving forward. How does that affect the football program? It doesn't matter, man. You got to go out and you got to execute. It doesn't matter what conference you're in. It doesn't matter, who's on the schedule. At the end of the day, Marshall University football team's got to go out and execute consistently for 60 minutes. That's it. That's what it's really going to come down to. We decide that we play a different opponent or whatever it may be. The goal's not going to change. So that may not answer your question, but I fully support our administration and all the people making these decisions. I will say I've been ultra pleased with the transparency. Sometimes in these things, you just wake up one day and you realize that all of a sudden you're playing in the Hawaii conference and no one's talked to you. That has not been the case here. Our administration has done a phenomenal job of laying out the pros and cons, possibilities, way before the Twitter machine puts it out.
Coach, getting back to the team, just we talked about the offensive line and the off week. You always hear that's the time to get right, heal those bumps and bruises. Just curious, is Logan's thing, is that long term? Is that something you expect him to be back a week or two? And kind of the same thing with Talik Keaton. We haven't seen him in a couple weeks.
Yeah, no, we don't have anybody who is out for the year. If that makes sense. Everybody's kind of day to day. Obviously, with a off week, it kind of helps some of that day to day operation. We won't truly evaluate those guys until we move into next week's game plan. This week for us is about development, on the field development, trying to get some of our younger guys, some of our 2s and 3s, more reps, more opportunities, a little slowed down teaching, so that in the event that one, they have to go in a game, that we are comfortable with what they know and what they can do. And then 2, so we can continue to create competition. The guys that are quote unquote starters now, we want those guys to continue to be pushed. So you got to come out to practice every day and compete. So this is a way for us to get those younger guys some reps, to get those younger guys some opportunities in practice that they may not have gotten when you're trying to get the 1s and the 2s ready for a game plan. Also an opportunity for us as a program to clean up some of the issues, formationally, some of the areas that teams tried to attack us over the first couple of weeks that may have been successful. To kind of clear some of those up, in a slowed down teaching tempo moment. Also an opportunity for us to do a lot of recruiting. We'll hit the road recruiting towards the end of the week to really get out and get in front of some of these prospects, their families, and their high school coaches. So there's a plan, but we won't be able to evaluate those guys that are day to day until we get into, okay, hey, we're getting ready to play FIU. Who's the starting right guard? Who's the left guard? Who's the whatever it may be?
I'm good if everybody else is.
We're good.
Thank you, Coach.
Awesome. Well,
Thanks,
I appreciate
Coach.
you guys. Don't get too sad without watching the Herd on TV this weekend. We'll be back real soon. Thank you guys again for all the coverage that you have. Really appreciate all of the fans who made it down to North Texas. I'm counting all green as Marshall green. So appreciate you guys. Look forward to seeing you next week. Go Herd.